December 6, 1991, Austin, Texas. Just before 11 p.m., a police patrol officer spots flames pouring out of a I can't believe it's yogurt shop on West Anderson Lane. Firefighters rush in, and what they find, it changes the city forever.
They find four teenage girls naked, bound with their own underwear, gagged with cloth, and shot in the head, execution style. And the building was set on fire, like whoever did it was trying to erase everything.
And for 34 years, this case haunted Austin. Four girls dead, four young men wrongfully accused, one of them sent to death row. And the real killer, he walked free, kept killing across four states, and finally turned the gun on himself in 1999.
And here's the crazy part, Zay. An HBO documentary, The Yogurt Shop Murders, directed by Margaret Brown, may have actually helped resolve.
Today on Coffee and Crime, we're telling the whole story: the crime, the false confessions, the documentary, the serial killer, and the four men who lost years of their lives to a justice system that got it catastrophically wrong.
But first, coffee month. What do you have, Zay?
Okay, I am having a mocha cafe latte. I think that's how you say it. Cafe mocha latte. Mocha latte
All three
for
of those
short.
things are in the name, I'm sure. I'm sure. Some in some variation.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
I am just having my regular whipped coffee. You all will find that I hyperfixate on things, and this is probably all I'll have, except for when it upsets my stomach. And then I have regular coffee, and then I have water, just so y'all are aware. But I thought this would be a good time to explain to everybody where we've been for the last week.
Yeah, yeah.
We were both
We
pretty
were
sick.
out. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were very sick. Mom got over it faster than I did, but at some point last week, we both ended up in the emergency room on different days.
Yes.
Mine
It
lasted a little
was.
longer. Yeah, it was
Mhm.
horrible.
It was quite horrible. And Zay tried to push through. She wanted to come do it. And I was just like, I had to take my podcaster hat off and put on my mom hat. Say, we're going to rest and we'll
Yeah.
come back with the doozy. And here we go.
Yeah, here we go. Because I mean, this is definitely the perfect case to come back to. This is insane. This is way more than I thought it was going to be.
Right.
And then it was wild to me because the killer was literally stopped by the border patrol with the murder weapon less than
Wow.
48 hours after the murders, but obviously they had no idea that he was fleeing the state from
Right?
committing
That's
murder. Right.
crazy. And then the police spent years chasing four teenagers who had nothing to do with it. Coerced confessions, death row, a decade in prison, all while Robert Brashers was out there murdering people, as you said, in four different states.
Yes, and then another crazy thing about the documentary was that it premiered originally as a four-part series while the case was still unsolved. But
Mhm.
3 weeks after it ended, the case was cracked. And so they had to come back and make a whole 5th episode, a whole full 90-minute episode called The End of Wondering. And it's crazy because when if you go and watch it, during that 4th case, one of the officers was talking about how he was connecting, reaching out to, like, different detectives and stuff to go
Mhm.
over what was happening, and he even told them, "It's a documentary on HBO coming out about the case. If you need to know more about it, you could watch it. I'm in episode 4." Like, I just thought that was hilarious, right? But so Margaret Brown, the director, she was headed to work on her next project
Mhm.
when she got the call that they needed to do the 5th episode. So she just turned around and went back to
Wow.
Austin.
So I guess the saying always follow the DNA is the true one for
Yes,
this case.
definitely.
So let's get into it.
Okay. So we're gonna picture this. It's Friday night in North Austin. Jennifer Harbison and Eliza Thompson, both 18, are working their shift at a yoga shop. Jennifer leaves to go pick up her younger sister Sarah, who's 15, and her friend Amy, who's 13, from the North Cross Mall, just 2 blocks away. She returns back to the yoga shop to finish her closing shift.
So they were just kids
Hmm.
working at this yoga shop on a Friday night. It's the end of their shift.
Yeah, I also worked at different food places. So being in like
Mhm.
Fuddruckers closing there, working with my
Yeah.
friend, we used to have a blast, put the radio on. And that's what the manager was saying that they used to do, put tunes on and just party. And the sister and the Sarah and Amy were just there waiting because obviously Jennifer
Mhm.
was their ride.
Right.
So then, just before 11 p.m., an Austin police officer sees the fire, alerts the firefighters who get there and put out the blaze. And that's when they make the discovery.
They discover all 4 girls were dead. They were nude and their hands were tied with their own underwear. Their mouths had been gagged with cloth, and each one was shot in the head with a 22 caliber pistol. But Amy Ayers, the youngest at 13, she was also shot with a 380 pistol. There was evidence of sexual assault, and whoever did it tried to burn the whole building down.
Which literally destroyed almost all of the forensic evidence. Almost. The only physical evidence that they recovered from that burned out crime scene was a single spent 380 shell casing that was found in a floor drain, perfectly preserved. And that casing sat there for 34 years before it finally told its story, before ballistics got to where it needed to be,
Mhm.
or they had the systems that connected what
Right.
they needed connected.
And the documentary's first episode is called Fire and Water. And that title is deliberate because that fire destroyed evidence. And then the firefighters coming in trying to put the fire out, their water hoses had destroyed whatever was left after the fire. So the crime scene was literally just washed away.
Yeah, and it's crazy because all of this came from Margaret Brown, so they were doing a ride along when the
Hmm.
call came in to John Jones, and he heard fire at first. So obviously he answered on the radio. I
Hmm.
heard whatever but what would they need me for? Because he's lead homicide. So that's when they radioed back in and told him that the fire department discovered 4 bodies.
Mm.
So then he arrives on scene, he walks in at the yogurt shop. It's burning, right? He goes in through the back door because
Hmm.
they were still working in the front.
Right.
And so then he goes in and he says, still dark. Obviously, it's a fire. It's wet everywhere. It's smoke everywhere. And they're moving around trying to get stuff done, I guess, clearing things out. And
Hmm.
as the smoke and stuff start to clear, that's when they can really see the 4 girls that they're bound with their underwear and they were shot. And what makes it's so interesting, the actual documentary, is the way the woman was like, it's her, she did this documentary and then sat on it. She didn't finish it. Then
Hmm.
she got in contact with Margaret Bound and they got together, and that's how it ended up getting on HBO. But the documentary, it features interviews with family members and friends of the victims and the lead investigator, John Jones and Paul Johnson, plus the homicide investigator, Mike Huckabee, plus dozens of people. It's a lot of people that they interviewed on the HBO documentary. It's
Hmm.
horrible because he said they walked in, the building is just burned. It's burned. It's
Oh,
destroyed.
yeah.
It, so, like you said, whoever did this really was trying to destroy everything. They didn't want anything left.
Hmm.
So they call the manager at the time. So they tell the manager, I cannot think of her name, but there's a fire at the yogurt shop. And the manager was like, originally, okay, well, it's almost midnight. I'm assuming everybody's gone. They finished their job, let it burn. Like, it's nothing I could do about it. And that's when
Yeah.
they tell her that there were 4 bodies found at the yogurt shop. So they ask her to come in if she and identify the bodies. So obviously she agrees. She says she walks in, it's dark, she can't really see anything. She said, I'm 24, it didn't really dawn on me fire bodies. She said, "Once I saw them, it was
Right.
nothing to identify. Like, there was no face, there was no clothes, they were burned."
Wow. Oh my
Which
god.
is just
That
to
had to
think
be
about, that's
horrible for her.
horrible, horrible to see, like, and then to know this is where it gets started. Now they know who it is because you can identify who the 2 young girls were supposed to be, Jennifer and Eliza,
Mhm.
working that night. I just
It's just sad.
yeah.
So let's name these girls again because they deserve to be remembered as more than
Mhm.
victims.
Yeah.
So we have Jennifer Harbison, who was 17, her sister Sarah Harbison, who was 15, Eliza Thomas, 17, and then Amy Ayers, 13. These are four girls, and their four families were shattered by this. And the city, it would never be the same after this.
And the police originally thought that this was robbery gone wrong. They didn't know where to start. So they're going around, they're asking the different people who were in the shopping center that night. The next
Hmm.
day, people are saying, check into the creek people. And it happened to be a creek not too far behind the shopping center where
Okay.
teenagers would go hang out.
Hmm.
And the witnesses were saying there are people who get into trouble. Like if you're hanging out in the creek,
Hmm.
you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And so they started looking into, and while they're doing all of this, like within a week, Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wellborn end up going to North Cross Mall,
Hmm.
which is the mall that Jennifer picked up Sarah and Amy from that night. Jennifer left,
Hmm.
went to go pick her sister up and her friend up from the mall, which was just 2 blocks away. So she was being responsible, went and got them, brought them back to the shop, and went
Hmm.
on trying to finish her shift. But Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wellborn go to the North Cross Mall. Well, Maurice has a 22 caliber handgun in his waistband, loaded,
Hmm. Wow.
and he has extra bullets in his pocket. So it seems
Wow.
like he's about to go
Do
on some kind
something.
of killing spree, right? Like it
Yeah.
looks very suspicious. So
Hmm.
obviously Maurice is arrested. They didn't arrest Forrest, though he was with Maurice because he didn't have a weapon on him. He wasn't doing anything
They had
wrong
no
other
real
than hanging
reason
out with this
to.
asshole. Yeah.
Yeah.
The 22 caliber handgun is the same make and model as the murder weapon for
Hmm.
Jennifer, Eliza, and Sarah.
Well, it
And
sounds like
so
they.
this is where Hector Polanco enters the picture. And Hector Polanco was supposed to be the homicide supervisor.
Right. And by 1991, he had 45 commendations and a reputation as a top notch investigator. But he also had a pattern, a really disturbing pattern.
And in 1988, just so you guys can kind of get a taste of this pattern, Polanco interrogated 2 gentlemen, Christopher Ochoa
Mm.
and Richard Danziger, for over 12 hours. That is a long ass interview,
That's
guys.
a very long time.
During that interview, he threatened both of them with lethal injection and prison rape, which is
Wow.
out of
Wow.
this
That's
world.
crazy.
Yeah.
You're threatening someone with
Yeah.
prison rape.
And lethal injection. So obviously, both of these men confessed to a Pizza Hut murder that neither of them committed, and they both served more than a decade in prison before DNA exonerated them. Obviously, Austin had to come off some bread for that, and they had to
Hmm.
pay $14.5 million in settlement to just these two for this one false conviction and them being sentenced and having to do time for crimes they did not commit.
And you would think that would be some encouragement for the Austin police to maybe get rid of him or at least keep
Hmm.
him from being a detective, I say. So in 1990, Polanco got two people to confess to murdering, listen, a woman who was actually still alive. And in
Woman was
1991, he got
alive.
John Salazar to confess to a murder that other people had already been convicted of. I mean, oh my God. And in
I mean, just look at
1992,
his face. Look at
he
his face.
that mustache, that big macho
Hmm.
mustache. Yeah, that's very much so. And also in 1992, internal investigations finally found Polanco involved in at least 7 false confessions.
7 minimum. And that's the homicide supervisor. Polanco interrogates Maurice Pierce for hours and he gets a confession. Maurice says he picked up Forrest and Forrest wanted to take his gun and go shooting. So they got the gun and instead of just going straight shooting, they went to the mall at 7:30.
Okay.
Forrest and Maurice get out of the car. Maurice says he has to go to the bathroom. So he goes to the bathroom and Forrest goes off and does his own thing. He comes out and could not Forrest at the mall at all. He looked for
Mm.
him, and then finally at around 10:45 p.m., he went to go wait for Forrest in the car, which that's a long ass time from 7:30 to
At a mall.
10:45 at a mall. I
Why
would
would I
think
stay
that
at the mall?
for all of this time. Anywho, so he said that Forrest showed up at the car at 11:30. He gave him back the gun and told him, "I did something." And
Mm.
when Maurice asked Forrest, "What did you do?" he would not answer him. He didn't give him an answer. But
Mhm.
he said that Forrest was sweaty and he smelled like hairspray and that the gun had been fired.
Okay.
So wherever he was at, Forrest was shooting something. He also went on to say that after him and Forrest left the mall, that they then went to go pick up two of their friends, Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott, who were both 17, and they went to this trail and they shot the gun. And so when they go to test the gun, that's why it'll be shot because in his fingerprints and stuff will be on it because
Would
this
be
is his
on it, right.
involvement, right? But if it was
Mm.
anything to do with the murder, that would have had to have been
That
Forrest,
wasn't
and
him.
that, yeah, that was his story,
Okay.
which is
A crazy
insane.
story. It
Yes,
sounds
it
like
makes
something a teenager would make up.
right. But obviously the confession fits Polanco's pattern. He gets confessions. But the
Mhm.
next morning, Maurice Pierce recants. He takes it back. So
Mhm.
then the lead detective, John Jones, goes in and he interrogates him or interviews him again. And that's when he realizes that the confession doesn't match any of the crime scene details. Everything he said was basically BS. Then when he did the ballistics on the gun, it came back inconclusive, which did not mean that it was not the gun used at the crime scene. They just could not
Mhm.
prove that that was that. So
Right.
obviously they released Pierce.
Right. But of course, Polanco wasn't done. In March of 1992, he obtained a written confession from a man named Alex Briones. Now, Briones had been arrested for a San Antonio murder when Polanco got him to verbally confess to the yogurt shop murders, though without much detail. So he didn't have a lot of detail to go with this confession he was giving. Other officers got suspicious, as well they should, and Briones was re interviewed. And he kept asking to speak to Polanco in private, which is weird. He finally signed the confession and then failed a polygraph. And then failed a polygraph. Briones later said Polanco had threatened him and told him what to say.
This is insane. And then right after this, in Mexico, two men were arrested based off of whatever. They were arrested for an unrelated kidnapping and sexual assault charge.
Hmm.
But they were said to, I guess they were the Austin police were in contact with whoever in Mexico. And one
Hmm.
of the witnesses that the police talked to that first night said that there was a Hispanic man outside of the yogurt shop. And one of these men fit the description. So the Mexican police officers interrogated them about the yogurt shop murders,
Hmm.
which they confessed to. Obviously, there was some kind of something going on with the
Right.
Mexican police that they
I
got
mean,
this
how many
confession.
people killed these girls? How many people are
Right.
you going to pick?
Right, but after they confessed, the Mexican, police had to let the Austin detectives come and interview them, and when they
Hmm.
did the interview, they recanted their confession, and the detectives were like, "None of the information you're giving matches the crime scene or anything that happened anyways." So,
Hmm.
I guess what they were trying to do was they had them on they're already on the unrelated charges, so they're trying to
Right.
throw more shit at 'em. And
Hmm.
they just
Just to
happen to
solve a case.
yeah. It just you fit the description, which is
Hmm.
just they did
Because
too much.
you're not actually looking for the real killers when you're doing this.
Right,
So whoever
right.
it is that killed these girls is still out there because you're just trying to get these cases off your books.
Right. Well, there are interviews with people who were there during this time who worked with Polanco, and they were saying Polanco was removed as head of the yogurt shop task force shortly after the Briones confession fell apart, which I because that's
Finally.
what three confessions,
Right.
but in total in this one they had six confessions, false confessions. So the Travis County District Attorney launched an investigation, obviously against Polanco,
Polanco.
right? So a grand jury, though, did not indict him, but the Internal Affairs Division did.
Good. So Polanco was charged with aggravated perjury for lying under oath about the Salazar confession, and he was suspended indefinitely. He sued the city for discrimination, won reinstatement on appeal, but the APD refused to let him back into homicide. They assigned him to a walking unit. He retired in 2001 with full benefits. And it's so clear that he is a corrupt detective and he won on
I
appeal and
mean,
got reinstated. These are not the people we want policing.
I believe attorney Berkeley Batiste said it better. He is the one who represented one of the boys that Polanco interrogated and got one of these falsifications out. But he said that Hector Polanco is the father figure of all the detectives who have come in his stead. They have the same convict at any cost mentality. If you're coming up under him, why, for the most part, this is
Well,
your
yeah.
supervisor. This is who's teaching you everything.
And that type of mentality, that one is what set the stage for every single thing that comes next.
And during John Jones' tenure as lead investigator from 1991 to 1994, six written false confessions were obtained. Six. Let that sink in. That is a lot for one case.
One, and
One
that's just
case.
him. We've already talked about Maurice Pierce and Alex Briones, but there were more. In the fall of 1992, two Mexican nationals wanted for an unrelated kidnapping and sexual assault were arrested in Mexico. One of them looked like a witness description from outside the yogurt shop. So, when questioned by Austin investigators, they denied involvement. But when Mexican authorities interrogated them, they confessed. The details didn't match the evidence as usual. Mhm. When Austin detectives re-questioned them, they recanted. They were cleared because they are being
Yeah.
bullied into saying these things.
Yes. But then after that, we have Kenneth McDuff, who was already on death row for three 1966 murders. Okay. He had been controversially paroled in 1989, killed again, and was awaiting execution when he confessed to the yogurt shop murders. So obviously, timeline evidence quickly proved that he couldn't have been in Austin that night. Okay. But for a death row inmate, confessing to additional murders offered strategic value,
Stays
potential
of
stays.
execution. That's when instead of a pardon, they get a stay of execution. They get life instead of death.
Yeah. So for
Right.
him, that's why he would have confessed to all of that. Not because he
Mm-hmm.
actually did it, but he could have
Right.
possibly gotten all of these extra things if they
Mm-hmm.
believed him.
And those are just the documented ones. The Austin Police Department received thousands of tips and dozens of confessions. Dozens. Most led nowhere. And the documentary features retired detectives talking about the pressure cooker they were in. The city was terrified. The media, I'm sure, was relentless. I mean, this four young girls killed, and everyone was demanding an arrest. And I understand that that has to be a lot of pressure when everybody is
Yeah.
looking at you to figure this out.
Yeah.
But that is not the time to start manufacturing evidence or bullying people into confessing, because what you're going to end up with is people in jail who didn't do it, and this person is going to kill again. The more that they get away
Mhm.
with it, this is not like a crime of passion.
Right.
Somebody went in there and killed these girls, so they're gonna do it again. And you
Honestly, just watching the HBO documentary, I felt extremely heartbroken for John Jones, the head
mm,
detective, because I mean, you could just see in his face how affected he was by these murders. You have to think, even though it sucks for the cops who are actually doing what they were supposed to be doing because of the whole
mm,
Polanco bullshit, because you could tell he really, really wanted to figure out what was going on. And
Right.
then during this time, now you have all these people saying, oh, well, they're getting all this attention and it's all of this happening because they're white girls who were killed. If it was, colored women or other people, then they have that pressure too, on top
Yeah.
of the fact that the case isn't solved. So
Mhm.
during all of this, he was diagnosed. He was told, he said that him and one of the other officers were doing something with the family, having some kind of meeting. And
Mhm.
the family told him, "Hey, I think you should go see somebody." And
Wow.
he said it hit him then when he was like, "What kind of mess do I have to be that the
Mhm.
family is telling me that I need help?" The cases I'm working, yeah.
Mhm.
So obviously he did. He went and got help. He went to go see somebody and he ended up being diagnosed with PTSD and was eventually removed from the case. And he
Mhm.
suffered guilt about the department's inability to solve the murders. Yes, he was thoroughly involved. And then when DNA finally did identify Brashers in 2025, it was Jones, who was retired at this point, who helped break the news to the family. And he had this special shirt that he wore and
Mhm.
that he had put in the closet. And he said, "The day that we solve this murder, I'll take this shirt back out and I'll wear it so I could come tell the families." And he took that shirt back
Wow.
out and went and told the families. And his instinct about the four young men had been right all along because he was the one saying he didn't think necessarily like the evidence wasn't matching for them to be there.
Right.
At one point at the beginning, he was like, "Yeah, it's possible," but along the route, he was like, "Yeah, I don't
It's
feel
just
it."
not lining up. And when your boss is like that and they're pushing that, it makes it a lot harder
Yeah.
in any job for you to do what's actually right because you have that pressure.
My goodness. Okay, so then we're going to fast forward 8 years to 1999. The Yoga Shop Task Force brings in four men for questioning. Again, these are the teenagers from the time.
Mhm.
So we have Maurice Pierce, once again. We have Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, and Forrest Wellborn. They all had been teenagers in 1991, and Forrest is the one in the top right corner. And at the end of this, he talks about how he was affected and how the cops did him. So obviously they thought he did it. They didn't have anything on him other than what everybody was saying and what Maurice had
Mhm.
said. And so when Maurice did confess, originally, I didn't say this earlier, when Maurice did confess, the next day after he confessed, he wore a wire. They wired him up and he called
Mhm.
or went to go meet Forrest and tried to get him to talk about what was happening. And he was like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And Forrest had made a joke like about like doing something to the girls, but he was like, "I was joking. I was just bullshitting with you. That's like me and you joking." And so
Yeah.
Maurice kept saying, "So if they come back and find out that the gun, then they're going to be on me." And he was like, "It's no way possible that that guy would never left and did anything with the gun by myself. Like the only time I used the gun, y'all were there. So I don't understand what you're saying."
Hmm.
And after that, if I'm not mistaken, that's when he recanted his
Oh, okay.
confession because you couldn't get forced to go along with it. And that's who you were trying to pin all of this on.
Right.
But he said that even after that, even after the recanted confession, the
Mhm.
police, they followed him around. He would get ready to walk to school and the cop would pull over and be like, "Hey kid, get in. We need to talk." They would take him and then they would have investigations. Mind you, he's 15 at the time.
That's
And the
just another person. You're victimizing this person. He's
yes.
another kid who had nothing to do with this.
Yep.
And that's not going to go away for him. I
No,
can't
no, he
imagine that it would.
cried.
You'd
He
be
cried as a grown
terrified.
ass man. He cried talking about it. And he said he had to leave school because everybody thought that he killed his girls, even though he had
Right.
nothing to do with it. And his mom left work because the cops were harassing him so much. She took off work so she could stay home with him. And she said the day she went back to work was the day the cops came and arrested him, which is diabolical.
That's
Diabolical.
horrible. That's just horrible. And here's what the documentary lays bare. If you look, like Zaylee was talking about, at at the interrogation footage, it is really hard to watch. Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were interrogated for hours. And Scott was questioned for more than 18 hours. Springsteen underwent a 5-hour videotaped interrogation session. And you could just look even at the pictures that you've been showing of those videos. You could almost see how confrontational it is, especially this
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, it's so like get to the point. And when they show the videos, you can see they're on their ass. They're not playing no games. Like, you did this, you did this.
Right.
It's horrible. The footage from the interrogations, you can see the detectives are yelling and swearing at the boys. And in that last picture I showed you, that's what I was saying, where one cop held a handgun, a finger gun, to his head, yelling at him, telling him, "This is what you did. This how you had the gun to the girl's head and shot them in the head." And under that kind of like pressure,
Right.
yeah, like somebody's bound to confess, and two of them did. Obviously, the original Maurice.
Mhm.
Maurice was the first one who confessed, but this time it wasn't him. It was Robert Springsteen who confessed,
Mhm.
and Michael Scott.
Mhm.
They implicated each other. They described crimes that neither one of them committed. They didn't
Wow.
commit. And both of them later recanted their confessions, saying that their confessions were coerced and they were under pressure. And one was like, "I don't remember what was going on." And that's when he was doing the finger gun, saying, "This is what you do. Now you remember. Tell me you remember." You know what I'm saying? Say, "This is what you saw Forrest do," or "This is what you saw Maurice do." Like, tell me this is what you saw. So this is the type of things he's saying in there. Yeah, that's coerced. You can't tell them to tell
You can't,
you.
because
Like,
even if you're not being abusive like that, you're still telling them the details. They're not
yeah.
giving you the
And if he's saying
evidence.
he doesn't remember, even if
Yeah,
it's
then he
BS,
doesn't
you can't give
remember.
him details. Yeah.
That's just crazy. Well, like you were saying, Forrest Wellborn and Pierce never confessed. Wellborn consistently maintained his innocence despite repeated questioning, abusive questioning, I would say.
Yes.
And here's the critical fact that the documentary hammers home: no physical evidence at the scene ever linked any of the four teenagers to the crime. No
None.
DNA, no fingerprints, no fibers, nothing.
Nothing but hearsay and what the community was saying and their
Right.
bias, right? But it didn't matter because in Texas in 1999, confessions were powerful. So you
Hmm.
confess, you did
That's
that
it.
shit, dangerously powerful. So
Hmm.
what happened was Michael Scott was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life without parole in 2002. And then
Right.
Robert Springsteen is convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death 2001. Which is crazy though, because Forrest Wellburn is no billed by a grand jury. Basically, they didn't have enough evidence to indict him, though he was the one who,
Hmm.
the week after the murders, confessed to all of this shit and then recanted it.
Right.
And the whole time, a lot of the people really felt like it was Forrest or it was Maurice. Even
Right.
after the recant
Hmm.
and this happening and he never got arrested, they stayed on Forrest's ass after this.
A lot of people, especially back then, didn't believe people would, if you didn't do it, you wouldn't confess to it. So when
Right.
people would recant, there was no such thing in people's minds as a false confession, because why would
Yeah.
you
Why
confess
would you say
to
that?
murder? Because we don't understand what it's like to be under that type of pressure,
Right. Like I was saying for Maurice, his charges were dropped for a lack of evidence.
because there was none. And then Springsteen spends 3 years on death row. Scott spends nearly a decade in prison. And the real killer, he's still out there and he's killing again.
And then
And when you
and
saw their parents trying to protect them, you waited until their parents weren't there.
yep, you went around it, which I feel like that's bullshit. You shouldn't be able to do that
Hmm.
to a teenager, nor should you be able to pick a teenager up off the side of the road without an adult and be like, "Get in the car, we need to talk." That's illegal. In 2004, the U.S. Supreme Court issues a ruling in Crawford versus Washington. It guarantees defendants the right to confront their accusers. So Springsteen and Scott had never been allowed to cross-examine each other in court,
Mm.
even though their confessions were used against one another during their trials.
Right.
Crazy. That's a constitutional violation.
Hmm.
So obviously, both men were granted new trials.
And as prosecutors prepare for those retrials, they ordered advanced ISTR DNA testing on vaginal swabs from the victims. Fairfax Labs developed a 16 marker unknown male YSTR profile.
And this is the moment that changes everything because during the time John Jones says when he originally went in there, examiners, he had to make the medical examiners wait to take the bodies because when you arrive on scene, if they're dead, then the bodies
Mhm.
automatically go to the medical examiners. So John Jones had to get the medical examiner to leave them so that they could do the swabs on the girls because DNA was
No.
just coming out. They didn't have database or any of that really
Mhm.
either. So when this happens, right, and they get the YSTR profile, then it's different because it's not like an exact
Mhm.
match, you know? But all of the four original suspects are excluded based off of this sample.
Okay.
And so the mystery DNA, since it doesn't match Morris or Robert Springsteen or Michael Scott or Forrest Wellborn, where do we go from here?
Right. And so in 2009, all charges against Scott and Springsteen are dropped. After nearly 10 years in prison, they walk free. But they walk free in a cloud of suspicion because people will always have suspicion. So many people in Austin still to this day believe they're guilty, that they just got off on a technicality. And that's crazy that they have to live with that stigma
Yeah.
because these police officers and detectives, or at least Polanco, who was over it, didn't do their job.
And then to think about that presumption of guilt because it never went away, at least not until 2025. Because though Forrest and Maurice never were arrested and served time for
Hmm.
this, they were never exonerated either. They were
Right.
always persons of interest in the case.
Hmm.
So it wasn't until 2005 that they went back to court
Right.
and they were finally exonerated and they had to go on the stand and they said the lawyer, when we go up there, we're not just going to say that you're exonerated because it took so long. We're going to go up here and we're going to prove you're exonerated by providing evidence that shows that you weren't
Mm,
there. So it doesn't matter what anybody says in court. We're going to give all the evidence to show that you
right.
are innocent. But the fact
Hmm.
that it took until 2000, so this was last year.
Right. So we need to talk about Maurice Pierce because his story is probably the most tragic one of all.
On December 23 in 2010, Maurice is stopped for a traffic violation near Palmer Lane in McNeil Road in North Austin. He gets out of his car and runs off. An officer, Frank Wilson, and his rookie partner, Bradley Smith, chase him. There is a struggle, and Maurice grabs Wilson's knife from his belt and stabs him in the neck.
And Officer Wilson shoots and kills Maurice. Wilson survives his injuries, but Maurice Pierce never lives to see his name fully cleared. He dies still branded a suspect in one of Austin's most notorious crimes. His widow and daughter are still fighting for his legacy today. And how sad is that?
In the HBO documentary, the daughter does come out and she talks about it. If I'm not mistaken, the mom and the daughter both talk. But the
Hmm.
daughter was saying it's the police fault that hit her father is dead because if they
Yes.
had never did that shit that they did when he was a teenager and coerced him into that confession, even though he
Hmm.
recanted it, so you have to
Hmm.
think about the fact that that's following him in the police station. We still think you're a suspect. He would tell them he is terrified that they would bring him back in there, and the next time they brought him to the police station, he wouldn't be able to go home. So yeah, he got the fuck out and he ran. I can
Right.
understand. He's traumatized.
Something happened like that? Absolutely not. No. And I understand that fear. That's your life. It was
Yeah.
almost taken away from you.
I mean, eventually they did get closure that he was found innocent and exonerated when everybody else was, but that wasn't for another 15 years, which is
That's
devastating.
horrible. All right, so let's talk about this documentary because it's remarkable. As we said, it was directed by Margaret Brown. Your turn. I feel like we did. The documentary lays out this entire case, the crime itself, the false confessions, the convictions, the DNA exoneration. And it concludes with the case still officially unsolved. Margaret Brown thought she was done. She was already starting her next project.
But then she had coffee with cold case detective Dan Jackson, and she notices he has a different demeanor. He tells her that he has a lead, but it could take a while to confirm. 4 days
He-
later, however, production on the surprise fifth episode begins.
Just 3 weeks after the docuseries concluded on HBO, the Austin Police Department holds a press conference on September 27, 2025, and they announced they've identified the killer.
His name was Robert Eugene Brashers. And this is the part that floored me. He was a serial rapist and killer, and he had been dead for 26 years. That was floored.
What? I don't know what to say. That's crazy. So the documentary that chronicled an unsolved case became part of its solution. The new episode features Detective Dan Jackson, genetic
Genealogist.
genealogist C.C. Moore, Forrest Wellborn, the widow and daughter of Maurice Pierce, the families of all four victims, and retired detectives John Jones and Paul Johnson.
And let's circle back to Forrest Wellburn and Maurice Pierce's family, okay? Because originally, neither one of them would agree to speak to Brown for the first 4 episodes. They only came forward after Brashers was identified, and that was because of how much the presumption of guilt had poisoned everything.
Yeah, Margaret Brown herself was scared to return to Austin. She worried the families would be more traumatized by the news, but she found them more relieved than traumatized, and she was deeply struck by something. The families were excited to know who killed their daughters, but they didn't seem upset that it was a serial killer instead of 4 boys.
Yes, and when she talked about it, it was crazy. She noticed something fascinating about the documentary's impact. The entire cold case unit came to South by Southwest screening on the first episode before the series even aired, and she wondered, did making an HBO show about this case light a fire under the department, which I'm sure it did, because
It did.
now there's going to be national coverage. Everybody's about to know what the
Everybody's
hell
gonna
is
be
going
talking
on.
about
And when she did speak to the families about like the fact that it was somebody else and not the boys, she asked them, like, do y'all feel for those boys? And a lot of them were like, no, we don't even think about it. And one mom was like, it's a terrible thing that their life was impacted the way that it was impacted, but I can't let myself go there, because then I have to mourn for all of their loss, because on my part, because once
Right.
they said they were guilty, that's what I thought it was. It was like genuine hatred for them.
Right.
So I can't even, it's not that I don't think about them or I don't care about what they went through, is what she was saying, but I can't mentally let myself even go there.
I would think that the emotion that you would feel after not only losing somebody so young, but to have them killed in such a horrible way, and not to mention Amy Ayers, who was also sexually assaulted. She was
Yeah.
only 13. That emotion has to take up so much space in you
Yeah.
that you can't take in anybody else's emotion.
Yeah. I feel like I would definitely empathize. I can get with you, but I can understand the not being able to sit in it. But Robert Eugene Brashers, who was finally named as the killer, he was born March 13, 1958, and died January 19, 1999.
Mm.
This is the year that all of those boys were convicted of this murder. He
Wow.
died the same year. He was a serial killer, mass murderer, and rapist who murdered at least 7 to 8 people between 1990 and 1998 across Kentucky, Missouri, South Carolina, and Texas.
Wow. He grew up in Huntsville, Alabama. He served in the military. He lived in New Orleans and Fort Myers, Florida. He was married to a woman named Dorothy. He had a biological daughter, Deborah, and 2 adopted stepdaughters. And in November of 1985, he attacked a woman named Michelle Wilkerson in Fort Pierce, Florida. He shot her twice in the neck and head. She did survive miraculously, and Brasher was convicted and sentenced to 12 years and released for good conduct in May of 1989. And I just want to say something right here. I don't care anything about good conduct. And I'm
That's
sitting in a
what I
place
was
where I don't have
gonna
anybody in prison.
say.
But of course, you're going to behave well in prison, right? Because there aren't little girls and women for you to murder in there and rape.
Yeah.
So good job for not raping girls and women where there are no girls or women.
Right. And obviously, once he got out, killing began. Okay. But what blows my mind, Mom, is that less than 48 hours after the yoga shop murders on December 8, 1991, Brashers is stopped at a U.S. Border Patrol checkpoint on Interstate 10 between El Paso, Las Cruces, New Mexico. He's driving a stolen car out of Georgia, and he's in possession of a .380 caliber AMT backup pistol.
The same make and model used to shoot Amy Ayers. The same gun he would use to kill himself in 1999. At that time, authorities had no idea. They charged him with auto theft and felon in possession of a firearm. The gun was returned to his father after sentencing, and Brasher used it again. Why would you return the gun to his father?
See, so how did they finally connect him
Mhm.
to all of this? It was literally 3 pieces of evidence.
So, first, it was the DNA. The YSTR DNA profile from vaginal swabs of 3 victims matched Brasher's, but the smoking gun an autosomal STR profile found under Amy Ayers' fingernails directly matched him. Detective Daniel Jackson said it best. Amy's final moments on this earth were to solve this case for us because of her fighting back. The likelihood ratio 2.5 million to 1.
That is a tiny ratio.
Wow.
The second piece of evidence was the ballistics, the .380 shell casing from the floor drain. In June of 2025, Detective Jackson submitted it to NIBIN, the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. And in July 2025, they got a hit. It matched an unsolved 1998 murder in Kentucky, which was Linda Marie Rutledge. She was 43. She was raped and shot in the head.
And third, the YSTR keyboard search. Detective Jackson asked labs across the country to manually search their databases. The South Carolina State Lab found a complete 27 allele YSTR match to a 1990 case, the murder of Genevieve Zitricki in Greenville, South Carolina. That case had already been linked to Brashers in 2018 through CC Moore and Parabon Nanolabs.
So the same DNA connects Austin to South Carolina, to Kentucky, and Missouri. And the same gun connects Austin to Kentucky to Brasher's own suicide.
That's just crazy. So Brashers didn't stop after Austin. His confirmed victims include Genevieve Jenny Zitricki, who was 28. She was bludgeoned, raped, strangled, strangled with pantyhose in her bathtub in Greenville, South Carolina on April 5th, 1990. And the killer wrote, "Don't fuck with my family" on the bathroom mirror. An unnamed 14-year-old girl raped in Memphis, Tennessee on March 11th, 1997, during a home invasion where he held her entire family hostage. Sherry Shearer, who was 38, and Megan Shearer, who was 12, they were a mother and daughter shot to death in Portageville, Missouri on March 28th, 1998. Megan was sexually assaulted, and 2 hours later, he tried to break into another home in Dyersburg, Tennessee. He shot a 25-year-old woman in the arm, but she fought him off. Then we have Linda Marie Rutledge, 43, who was raped and shot in the head in Lexington, Kentucky, November 7th, 1998. That's
Yes. And then January 13, 1999, the police find a stolen vehicle at Super 8 Hotel in Kennett, Missouri. Brashers is inside with his family. They break down the door. He's hiding under a bed with a loaded gun. He takes his wife, daughter, and 2 stepdaughters hostage. After 4 hours of negotiations, he releases his family and shoots himself in the head. He hangs on for 6 days before dying on January 19th, 1999.
and he
And
never
just
faced justice.
sorry, and just look at this picture, okay? Because I know he's playing, but do you see how he has his hand on this little girl's neck?
Yes.
Like, what dad plays
For
with their
what?
kids like that?
Like, what are you playing that you have to put your hand around her neck like that?
And then you put all of them in danger.
Wow. So he never faced justice for any of these crimes. It's reprehensible.
But on February 19th of this year, 2026, a judge formally declares all 4 men innocent. Maurice Pierce, Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, Forrest Wellborn, officially exonerated. Thank you, because
So the Travis County District Attorney Jose Garza stood before the court and said, The overwhelming weight of the evidence points to the guilt of one man, Robert Eugene Brashers. Likewise, the overwhelming weight of the evidence points to the innocence of four men, Maurice Pierce, Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, and Forrest Wellborn.
Obviously, it's a lot of F ups there.
Yeah.
Baby, let me tell you something. Austin gonna be bankrupt. You understand? Because that from these four and then the two from Polanco, that is $49.5 million in settlements for wrongful
Mm,
convictions.
right. That's crazy. When you could have gotten rid of the bad apple, you knew who it was. There was no doubt.
And $35 million, that's a shit ton of money. Even split four ways, that's a
Yes.
shit ton of money. But the
Hmm.
money's not going to give them back the years or give them back the dignity to be
Right.
able to walk around or to give back Maurice Pierce's life
Right.
from him running from trauma and then being murdered by a police
Right.
officer. Even though it doesn't give it back, it is acknowledgement for all of that,
Hmm.
however late.
Very
The
late.
system definitely failed catastrophically. Yeah, but the question remains about coerced confessions, about death penalty, and about how many other Robert Brashers are still out there, and how many other Maurice Pierces, Robert Springsteens, Michael Scotts, and Forrest Wellburns are sitting in prison for crimes they didn't commit.
Right. The Homicide Victims Families' Rights Act of 2001, motivated by this very case, was passed to help ensure federal law enforcement reviews cold case files and applies the latest technology. It's a start, but it's not enough.
Margaret Brown said something that stuck with me. She said she went into this not to solve the case, but to explore how people deal with the most unimaginable thing. And what she found was that when you go from uncertainty to certainty, everything changes. The families weren't just relieved, they were different people because now you don't have this weight hanging over you of what happened or trying to
Right.
live your life to get answers for your loved one. And just to drill in how much this case impacted the Austin PD, they built diagrams of the yogurt shop and they had large pictures of Jennifer, Amy, Sarah, and Eliza in the walkway as soon as you walk into the police station. So that way it reminded them of this case so they never forgot it so they could keep working
Mm.
it. This is what they have as soon as you walk in. This has been Coffee and Crime with Mom, and I'm Zaylee.
And I'm Nicole. And if you enjoyed this, learned anything, make sure to follow us, rate, review, like, subscribe, all of the monotonous things we need for you to do. It helps us get out there. So thank you guys. Stay
Yes.
caffeinated, stay curious, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Yes. Toodaloo.